Welcome to another session. I hope you are well. In today's session, I want to talk about laziness and how depression is affected by laziness. Now, least you think that this will be um, an opportunity for me uh, to suggest that those who are uh, depressed or have any symptoms of depression or anxiety are somehow naturally lazy. That is not my intention in today's session. In any case, I think there is a connection and a link that we can make in trying to understand the root cause of our depression or the root cause of our anxiety, mental health issues, and any challenge we might face. Let me start by saying actually that laziness is inherent in, in all of humans intrinsically. Humans are intrinsically lazy. There's nothing wrong with that from an evolutionary perspective. The reason being is that being lazy or laziness, historically, uh, it was an essential survival tool with regards to the whole concept and the whole business of conserving energy. I know it's difficult for us to fathom and to relate to, but there was a time when we did not have the abundance of refrigeration and technology and infrastructure and abundance. Our forefathers and foremothers were hunter gatherers. You had to go out and hunt, then you had to hibernate. Um, for some fascinating reason, nature worked with humans in order to preserve our longevity, and therefore, uh, with regards to the whole business of conserving energy, the body tries to keep us at a state where we do not overspend by almost forcing us to become lazy. Now, this is important because when I talk about depression, there is a role that I won't use the word depression, but there's a role played by nature in slowing us down because we don't have enough energy. When you feel lethargic, when you feel fatigued, when you feel tired, when you feel low in energy, the body's signaling something. It's saying you don't have enough energy. Something is amiss. Something isn't right. So the body goes into a functional process of slowing you down so that you can take some action. Nature carefully matches your energy expenditure with the needs that you might have. Now, if this does not take place, then we risk the whole possibility. We risk that we might actually fail with regards to knowing how to fight the things that the elements bring our way, such as famine, such as starvation, and even infections. We even risk the opportunity to find food. So nature has a fascinating way of working with humans. It has an intelligence behind it, just like we have an intelligence behind us. But because nature is looking to preserve us for a long time, sometimes it does things that we don't understand at the initial moment. So historically, yes, we had to survive, therefore we had to conserve energy. So during the winter months and the cold months, we hibernated, we rested. When it was warmer, we hunted. At the end of the autumn, we gathered. At the start of the winter, we preserved. Modern man and woman, on the other hand, are very different. We have come up with these great technologies that have made life easy. In many ways, our ancient forefathers were still at the bottom of what Maslow's hierarchy of needs would refer to: food, shelter, security. In the West, if you live in the West, in the modern West, modern man and modern women, we have an abundance. We've gone past the physiological needs, and we've gone past the self-esteem needs, and now we are actually moving to a self-actualization. We have everything therefore in abundance. So there is no need to preserve during the winter because we have central heating, we have air conditioning, we have comfort cooling, we have ventilation, we live in good buildings, we live in cities that have enough infrastructure. Therefore, the whole business of preserving the individual no longer applies. What we have, therefore, is a level of laziness that was not consistent with what we used to have in the past. We have become generally lazy as human beings. Most people who suffer from a level of depression, there's a correlation, and a good one, between exercise or the lack thereof, and people's state of mind and well-being, physically, psychologically, emotionally, and mentally. Exercise is important. There are different forms of exercise, and I'm connecting this laziness topic to exercise as I go forward. Most people are lazy. Most people want to remain lazy. But if you want to survive and thrive, if you want to have a fulfilling, exciting life, you have to be active. But more importantly, if you want to be invited to be part of the group, you have to show that you have some energy and that people can feed up the energy that you have. Exercise is one way that we start the whole process of ensuring that we give ourselves the best chance of long-term survival. But exercise comes in several forms. There's a social side to exercise. There's a non-social side to exercise. There's an intensive part of exercise, and there's a non-intensive part of exercise. We try to mix this as much as we can across different, you might say, phases of our lives. But fundamentally, exercise is a social activity. This is partly why if you train in isolation and if you train alone, you might be successful, but there is something about having an accountability partner, someone who actually becomes a guide, someone who becomes a mentor, someone who becomes a sparring partner, someone who becomes a support system, actually someone who actually shares a similar goal with you. So when we go to local exercise venues, local gyms, yoga studios, meditation studios, you might say cycling clubs, running clubs, there's a social aspect to that. And it is difficult for you to feel depressed if you are part of a social group for which exercise perhaps is at the corner or the central corner of what that group stands for. So for example, you go to the gym and you walk into the gym. If you are interested in people, people will find you interesting, and therefore people give back what they receive. You're training at the corner, someone comes and says, "Can you help me?" A conversation begins. Suddenly, there's an opportunity for your experiences and their experiences to merge. Sometimes friendships develop from that. Some of those friendships go along to become very strong bonds. So there is a social side. Group sports, group activities are very important. There's also the non-social side to exercise. There's solo exercises that you can do and you can get involved in. Running independently can be a solo exercise. We know sometimes those who play tennis consider it to be a very lonely process, especially if you play professionally, because for a short period of time, it's just you. Your coach isn't around. It's you and the opponent. So there is a social and a non-social aspect to exercise. And if you want to get over depression, you have to combine exercise, both socially and non-socially. There's an intense part to exercise, and there's a non-intense part to exercise. The intensity might come from, lifting weights, doing very strenuous, intense exercises physically. It might also be perhaps joining a club and doing a combination of various forms of exercise within a short period of time, where you have a timed, you might say duration, where you have to say, lift a certain amount of weight, run, swim, and all of these create a level of intensity that allows, you might say, a pulse rate, your blood pressure, the temperature, your core temperature to change. There is also a non-intense form, which is still as effective. Yoga, meditation, Pilates. The key thing about this is that both the intense and the non-intense opportunities for exercise can fall under the social or the non-social side. We then have to choose how we mix. There are some people who are depressed, clinically depressed, and therefore it requires so much more energy to socialize. Also requires much more energy to go into an intense exercise program. And therefore, you might begin on the non-social side and combine that with a non-intense way of exercising until you build some stamina. The key thing is that you have to recognize that exercise is key, especially in modern society. Now think about this. Quickly, or briefly rather. Have you ever seen rabbits, squirrels, pheasants exercising? We talk about exercise, and one of the things we do not observe is that amongst the wild, they do not exercise. I don't see lions lifting weights or doing burpees. I don't see tigers doing sit-ups. I don't see kangaroos doing their chin-ups and pull-ups. The question is why? Why is it that in the animal kingdom they do not engage in any form of exercise, but they seem to have a level of fitness? Well, certainly they don't have any form of depression, because that is not assigned to non-thinking humans. One of the reasons for that is because in the animal kingdom, animals are designed to operate by instinct and the genetic code. Human beings have been given this free will. We've been given these intellectual faculties that enable us to create the world we want, a kingdom of heaven or a kingdom of hell. But in the animal kingdom, there is a predator-prey interaction or relationship that exists. The rabbit has to run, the squirrel has to run, the pheasant may have to run away from a predator. And the predator has to chase the prey very strongly in order to get fed. So there's a whole saying, in the jungle, on one side one animal wakes up and starts to run, and on the other side one animal wakes up and starts to run. Whether you're the one being chased or the one doing the chasing, the moral of the story is you have to run. And what you find is there's an intense short burst of activity where one is running away so that they do not become another person's or another animal's lunch, and the other is running very fast so that they have lunch for that day. That creates an intense level of exercise that stimulates and keeps animals active. Amongst human beings, we do not have that. As a matter of fact, if you were to go back to World War I and World War II, one of the reasons why, if you look at photographs of antiquities, is, and you notice that they seemed much healthier. Well, it was partly because there was a need for survival back then. We had enemies, we had foes who were looking to annihilate our very existence. So there was this predator-prey relationship that existed. In the modern West, we do not have that. And I actually would say that depression, therefore, could be conceived to be an evidence of the absence of this predator-prey relationships amongst human beings or in our lives. And let me give you a good example. You can exercise in a slow pace, but if you allow yourself to vary your exercise so that your heart rate changes and goes up very rapidly for a short, intense period, that is good enough. Which is why some people would say, well, why don't you do burpees? For example, I'll use myself as a good example. My way of cardio has never been getting on a treadmill and running for hours, or getting on a bike, a local bike in the gym and cycling for hours. I've always preferred almost a 10-minute session at the end of the workout phase where I simply do burpees. And I find if I do 10 sets of 10 reps of burpees, I feel incredible. My heart rate and my heartbeat, it escalates to a level far above what I gain from running on the treadmill or running on the streets constantly. Now there is a rule of thumb which is there is a maximum heart rate level you want to have. You don't want to exceed that, because by doing that, what you tend to find is actually you produce too much, or you burn up too much lactic acid. If you take 220 as a number and you subtract your age from 220, that will give you the maximum heart rate that you should be aspiring to have. For example, if you're 50, you then have 220 minus 50, and that gives you 170. That's the heart rate. That's the maximum heart rate beats per minute that you should have. Something below, great, but you should be striving to push into that level. Reason being that if you can develop sufficient power in a short, intense period of time, it creates you to move from this natural physical state of a human being, and it shifts you into a state as though you are an animal. It creates this predator-prey relationship or scenario where your heart actually acts in a manner that it thinks it's trying to keep you alive. You produce lactic acid, and by doing it in a short, intense way and not overdoing it, the possibility of over-exercising or causing yourself injuries is much more reduced. Now, I am aware, and it would be remiss of me not to say that this does not apply to the majority or to all people. It might apply to the majority of people, but not to all people. There is a small group of people who suffer from chronic fatigue syndrome, and those who suffer from what we call ME, which is chronic fatigue plus inflammation. Such people do not have the energy to do burpees or sprints or heavy exercises. And even such people do not have the energy to get into social forms of, you might say, workouts or exercises. I understand that. The point of this is that there is still a relationship between laziness, exercise, and depression, and that you should set yourself goals, especially if you are in that group of chronic fatigue or ME patients. Set yourself goals that are so small that you cannot fail. Avoid setting yourself big goals that will cause you to, where you break your will. I used to say this when I was much younger. Set your goals so large that it excites you, motivates you, and stimulates you at the same time. That is valid, because that's effectively the vision, that's the end. But then set your goals so small that you cannot fail. In other words, take those big goals and break it down into small chunks. And then your small chunks is what you focus on. The reason being that so you can develop confidence. You develop a record of wins, and that allows you to take more action. Whereas if you start off with the end in mind and look no further than what you see, and you look no nearer than what's before you, there's a possibility that the goal will become so heavy that by attempting the goal, you find actually you break yourself beyond repair. So keep in mind, whether you're suffering from depression, there is a useful way of overcoming and getting past wherever you might find yourself. If you're suffering from anxiety, there's a useful way of getting past that process, and that is amongst people and by staying active. I hope this has been a useful session.